How do you rob a place with no doors, guarded by an unhackable AI? You don't. You walk right in. And the only person who knew how was the one man everyone was paid to ignore, the night watchman. Welcome to The Everyday Hero. Before we begin this story of how the secrets of an impenetrable fortress were unraveled by a man no one noticed, tell us in the comments what city you're joining us from. And if you believe the greatest power lies within the quietest minds, be sure to subscribe. Quasar Dynamics was less a company and more an idea. It was a windowless, seamless monolith of titanium and concrete in the heart of Silicon Valley. Inside, the world's brightest minds developed quantum computing and artificial intelligence prototypes that would shape the future of humanity. The building was protected by an AI named Argus. Argus was the building's nervous system. It saw every hallway, controlled every door, and even analyzed the oxygen levels in the air in real time. To enter Quasar Dynamics, one had to pass a 7-layer security wall of biometric scans, voice confirmations, and unpredictable algorithmic passcodes. Breaking into Quasar Dynamics was as impossible as stealing a thought. And in the center of this digital fortress, at a simple wooden desk in the main lobby, sat Sally. Sally was a man in his late 50s, slow-moving, with a belly that entered a room a few seconds before he did. The security uniform he wore always seemed a bit too tight, and his face held a constant expression of weariness. In front of him was a massive monitor displaying the feeds from 100 cameras at once. But Sally rarely looked at it. His world consisted of the worn-out crossword puzzle magazine on his desk, an old thermos steaming with tea, and the words he slowly unraveled every night. The young, energetic scientists and engineers would walk past him as if he were a part of the desk. They never said good morning. They didn't know his name. He was a ghost from an analog world, forgotten in a digital age. But Salih was watching, not just with his eyes, with everything. He didn't look at where people were going, but how they walked. He noticed the slight change in the scent of the polish the cleaning crew used. He knew that a fluorescent light on the third floor flickered for just a moment every 42 minutes. He never told anyone these things. He just made small, cryptic notes in the margins of his puzzle book. Lamp 42, Tuesday, or Polish, citrus. These were his patterns. The heist was discovered on a Tuesday morning. The Xenon 7 prototype, a priceless quantum processing core, had vanished from its bulletproof case, but there was no evidence of a robbery. The door hadn't been forced. The alarms never rang. Argus's system logs were pristine. It had reported no unauthorized entry, no anomalies all night. It was as if the prototype had never existed at all. The company's own security team was helpless. Federal agents arrived. They spent hours reviewing system logs, analyzing code, and forming theories. But they had nothing. It was a perfect crime, an impossible crime. 4 hours into the investigation, 2 agents walked over to Sally's desk as a matter of procedure. They held coffee cups, their faces etched with frustration. "Sir," the younger one said, "you were on duty last night. Did you see or hear anything unusual?" Sally slowly looked up from his puzzle. "No," he said softly. "It was a quiet night. Same as always." "Did you fall asleep?" the other agent asked, a bit more cynically. Salish smiled. "It's hard to sleep in this chair." He poured a cup of tea from his thermos and offered it to them. "Tea?" The agents rolled their eyes, declined the offer, and walked away. To them, Sally was just a waste of time. Hours passed. The investigative team had hit a wall. The building's digital ghost, Argus, insisted everything was normal. The billion-dollar security systems answered them only with silence. Agent Miller, the lead investigator, stood before a whiteboard covered in meaningless diagrams. He had nothing. It was then he heard the sound of a cup being placed on a porcelain saucer behind him. He turned to see Sally, holding a steaming cup of tea. "A long day," Sally said gently. "When the brain gets tired, it takes the path of least resistance. But sometimes the answer isn't on that path." Agent Miller was exasperated. "Look, Pop," he said, "I don't have time for philosophy. If you didn't see anything," Salish didn't interrupt. He just placed a napkin on the table. "Was last night's catering order from the usual place?" he asked. Miller was stunned. "What? What does that have to do with anything?" "Just curious," Sally said. "Also, does the air conditioning on the third floor always run 2 degrees colder on Wednesdays?" Agent Miller's patience was wearing thin. "What kind of questions are these? We're trying to solve a high-tech robbery, and you're talking about food and the AC," Salish shrugged. "Sometimes, to open a big door, you need a small, rusty key." He posed one last question. "Why don't you ask Argus for a report on the voltage fluctuations for the East Wall's power lines from the last 24 hours, specifically around 2:42 a.m.? As Sally turned and walked back to his desk, Agent Miller hesitated. Desperation makes you give absurdity a chance. He called a young agent over. "Check what the old man said," he whispered. "The catering company, the AC records, and that voltage fluctuation. It's nonsense, but we've got nothing else." When the young agent returned half an hour later, his face was pale. "Sir," he said out of breath, "you're not going to believe this. The catering company was different last night. They cited a temporary supplier issue. The AC records, yes, the third floor has been running 2 degrees colder for the last 4 Tuesday nights, not just Wednesdays. And the voltage report, at 2:42 a.m., there was a rhythmic millisecond-level fluctuation that lasted for exactly 90 seconds. Argus logged it as a minor grid anomaly." Agent Miller was frozen. The data was meaningless, but everything Sally had asked was correct. He walked quickly to Sally's desk. Sally was back to his crossword puzzle. "Explain," Miller said. "What does all this mean?" Sally slowly put down his pencil. "The thieves didn't hack Argus," he said. "They tricked it. Argus is a machine. It follows patterns. The thieves taught it a new, normal pattern." Sally began to explain. The different catering company had brought in trays with a unique chemical signature. When placed against the wall where the prototype was stored, they temporarily blinded Argus's chemical sensors in that area. The colder air conditioning was used to mask the heat signature of a special device the thieves used. Argus attributed the temperature difference to the AC anomaly and ignored it. "But how did they get the prototype out?" Miller asked. "They didn't," Sally replied. "They sent the data with light. That rhythmic fluctuation in the power line, that was a signal. They converted the prototype's quantum data into a light frequency that no one would notice and transmitted it to a receiver outside the building in seconds. To Argus, it was just a power flicker. What was left behind was just a useless piece of metal." The thieves had walked in, wearing the new catering company's uniforms, transmitted the data without anyone noticing, and walked right out. They hadn't attacked the building's security system. They had attacked the routines of the human and service systems around it. Agent Miller looked at the man in front of him, speechless for the first time in his career. None of this was in any report. How could you possibly know all this? Sally pointed to his worn-out puzzle magazine. "Everything is a pattern, Agent," he said. "Words, numbers, people's habits, they all leave a pattern. I don't look for what's wrong. I just notice what's different. Sooner or later, the patterns tell the story." Agent Miller didn't just solve a robbery that day, he met a legend. You see, Salih was a former homicide detective with an incredible gift of observation who had left the job years ago. He was famous for solving the most complex, unsolvable cases by connecting the tiny patterns no one else could see. But he had grown so tired of seeing the dark patterns in human behavior that he had retired, finding the quietest, most boring job he could to turn off his brain. The night watchman job at Quasar Dynamics was his sanctuary. But old instincts, they never truly sleep. Heroism isn't always about charging into a battlefield with a sword. Sometimes heroism is sitting quietly in a place everyone else overlooks, patiently putting the patterns together. The strongest fortresses are conquered not by the strongest armies, but by the most observant eyes. Sally didn't get a medal or a thank you that night. He didn't want one. He just finished his puzzle, sipped the last of his tea, and prepared for the next quiet night. Thank you for watching The Everyday Hero. If you believe the sharpest weapon is a quiet mind, subscribe to our channel. We'll see you in the next story.